welcome to the new viewers, and welcome back to the subscribers. So the title says it all. This is the history of Old Town Tacoma. Or was it Eureka? Or Tacoma City? Or Commencement City? Let's dig right in. As with all lands in western Washington, it was inhabited before it became part of the United States. The Puyallup tribe, or as they were called, which means people from the bend at the bottom of the river. They had settlements at the head of the bay where the Puyallup River Delta empties into the Puget Sound. The Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854 created the Puyallup Reservation. Feeling that they'd got the short end of the stick, they joined up with the Nisqually and other tribes in what was called the Indian Wars of 1855-56. In 1856, they had another meeting with Territorial Governor Stevens. They agreed to go on to the reservation. I will make some videos on different tribes as well as the natives in western Washington in general. And the U.S. Navy Lieutenant Charles Wilkes named the bay inlet at the mouth of the Puyallup River Commencement Bay in 1841 because that's where he started his mapping of the Puget Sound. Nicholas DeLynn built a water-powered sawmill in 1852 where a creek entered the head of Commencement Bay. He was the first settler on record to live on the bay. There was a town building up around the mill until the Indian War forced the settlers to go to the forts. After it was over, they did not return to this site. While at Fort Stelicum, Nicholas and his wife Gertrude would apply for money that was set aside for settlers who had been damaged in some way during the war. The DeLynns ended up in Portland, Oregon, and died in the late 1880s. In 1864, a 51-year-old Union Army veteran named Job Carr gets out of the military after 2 injuries. Rebecca, his wife, was a nurse in the war and followed Job's regiment around. When he was hurt too bad to return to battle, she went with him and helped him get well. They were not together at this time. History says she was heavy into spiritualism, and with Job being a devout Quaker, that may have caused problems. That same year, Rebecca filed for divorce in Indiana. Job came to Commencement Bay and homesteaded 168 acres near where today's 30th Avenue North meets Ruston Way. History says he was looking for a site to build a town, and when he saw the area, he said, "Eureka!" So of course he named it Eureka. At first it was just him and a cat named Tom he was given by the Stewart family, who he lived with on the reservation while he built his cabin. Job was the first justice of the peace and notary. Job also fought for women's rights to vote. Job's son Anthony also fought in the war, and when it was over he arrived in 1865. Just in time to help put the roof on his father's cabin. He learned photography while in the Army. When he arrived in Washington Territory, he first went to Stelicum, where he bought a camera and a photography studio. If it had not been for him, we would not have the photos of early Eureka that we do have. In 1866, Job's other son Howard walks from where the Cowlitz River meets the Columbia up to Stelicum to meet up with his dad and brother. Marietta, Job's daughter, would come out west the following year. General Morton McCarver, founder of Burlington, Iowa, and Linton, once a town, now a neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, came to Eureka in 1868, and Job Carr sold 160 acres of his claim to him, leaving Job the 8 acres his cabin was on. McCarver also filed claims for more land in the area. At first he called his town Commencement City. People didn't care for the name for various reasons. Philip Ritz, a contractor for the railroad, suggested he should name it Tacoma after their translation of the native word for Mount Rainier. Anthony Carr was hired to build a cabin for the general roughly down the bank to the east of present-day Stadium High School. In 1869, Janet Steele built the Steele Hotel at 13th and McCarver, or present-day 2105 North 30th Street. It was the first frame building and the first hotel in Commencement City. The hotel had 25 rooms, 15 of those were guest rooms. It was a 2-story building with a porch the full length of the building on 2 sides. Floyd Steele was the first settler born in Commencement City. McCarver sold her and her husband 4 lots with a 5-year catch. If the railroad arrived in town, they owed $300. If it didn't arrive, they owed $100. In 1869, Morton McCarver, along with his business partners, James Steele and Louis Starr, went to the land office in Olympia with the plat they had drawn out. They wanted the town to be called the Town of Tacoma, only one problem. Job's son Anthony beat him to it and filed a plat for a town named Tacoma on his land, which was a few acres he had more inland. McCarver thought quickly, but didn't think it through well enough when he chose to call his plat Tacoma City. If you look at the plat or even the streets that exist today, you will see McCarver, Star, and Carr streets. Now we know where each of these names came from. In 1869, Job became postmaster and the post office was located in his cabin. His son Anthony was the mail carrier. He brought the mail to and from the wharf in Stellicum. After the mill's dock was built, then the steamer Eliza Anderson stopped by to collect the mail. Anthony was married this year to Josephine Bird, whose father owned the historical Bird Mill in Stellicum. Anthony split his time between Stellicum and Tacoma. General McCarver and his family moved into a new house at 28th and McCarver. It was a real house. It even had paint and was the pride of the community. McCarver set to work to entice the Northern Pacific Railroad to come to his town, as well as attracting settlers to it. Samuel Hadlock, the founder of the town of Port Hadlock, was in the area with John Ackerson in 1869 looking for a mill site. John was an associate of Charles Hanson, the Redwood Shingle King from California. They would open the Hanson, Ackerson and Company Mill, also known as the Tacoma Mill, located at present-day 3001 North Star Street. The first shipment of lumber went to San Francisco. He was the first person in Tacoma to ship to other countries, initially to Peru and Australia. In 1880, the mill was the largest employer in either Tacomas. When Hanson died in 1898, the mill was passed on to his son. The mill closed in 1913, and the vacant building was destroyed by fire in 1922. In September of 1869, the Tacoma School District was created, and a one-room log cabin school at 28th and Star Street was built at a cost of $300. J.P. Stewart was the first teacher for 13 students. All of Job's children had moved to Tacoma by 1870, so his ex-wife Rebecca did as well. She told the future to people with an attention on who people should marry. She was called Mother Staley by many. She stayed in Tacoma until her death. In 1870, the first stage from Tacoma City to Stellicum and Olympia opened up. In 1873, the telegraph made it to Tacoma City. Anthony Carr made the first telegraph to Seattle. In 1873, they also got a telegraph received by Anthony Carr to McCarver, saying that the railroad had picked Tacoma as the end of the line, just as McCarver had hoped. When they received the letter by mail, though, they were horrified to find the railroad had decided on land 2.5 miles away, actually near where Nicholas Delisle had built his mill so many years ago. That same year, the railroad finally made it to Tacoma. The first train came from Portland, Oregon, as the Stampede Pass route had not been completed yet. The rail line connected Tacoma to St. Paul, Minnesota, and everywhere in between. An 11-year feud between the two towns began. Also in 1873, the first service was held at St. Peter's Episcopal Church, located at 2910 North Star Street. The building seats 75 people. It is the oldest building in Tacoma. The bell tower was a 48-foot fir tree. The bell was donated by the Sunday School of St. Peter's Church in Philadelphia. The land and lumber was donated by people and businesses in the community. The building itself was built by mill workers. It is the oldest building in Tacoma, still standing today and still holds services each Sunday. McCarver, through his business, McCarver Street Wharf Company, built a dock in 1873 at what is now 2200 Ruston Way. The dock was used for shipping industry until 1886, when operations were moved to the tide flats. The dock was 260 feet long. The city took over the dock and opened it to the public in 1887. The dock was rebuilt in 1916, 1929, 1953, 2000, and 2013. We all now know it as the Old Town Dock. The railroad set to work building their town. They called it City of Tacoma. People from Tacoma City called it New Tacoma, and people in the city of Tacoma called Tacoma City Old Tacoma. They both wanted to be just called Tacoma. New Tacoma bought up the land between the two towns and refused to allow a road to connect them. Only a few people could hang out in either Tacoma, and one of those was Job Carr. By 1875, McCarver's Tacoma City was an official incorporated town. Tacoma City had 177 eligible voters. The city of Tacoma had 77. These numbers did not count natives or Chinese. They only counted black people if they owned property. Sadness struck that same year when Morton McCarver passed away. Job's daughter Marietta and baby also died that year when the boat they were on collided with another boat. In 1875, Job Carr is elected the first mayor of Tacoma City. Howard Carr is made the town marshal. Anthony Carr would seek divorce from Josephine on the grounds of desertion in 1876. In 1880, the population of Tacoma City and New Tacoma combined was 1,008 people. Tacoma City had many docks for the lumber ships. McCarver's Wharf, or Old Town Dock as we know it, had regular stops for the ferry boats. There was also the Steele Hotel, a post office, and St. Peter's Church. The Steele family sells their hotel in 1883. In 1888, it is called the Fuller Hotel. By 1901, it was rebuilt and renamed the Ashton Hotel. The building was torn down in 1920, but a marker was put on the site in 1923. In 1883, Nettie Asbury earned her doctorate degree in music. She is thought to be one of the first African American women to earn a doctorate degree. In the early 1900s, she helped form the Tacoma NAACP in 1913. The Washington legislature wanted to ban interracial marriage. Nettie led protests to kill the bill, and it worked. As founder of the Tacoma NAACP, she fought racial segregation in public places and at Fort Lewis. She taught piano to Tacoma's children for nearly half a century from her house at North 30th and McCarver. There is a marker on the sidewalk in her honor. In 1884, the two Tacomas finally agreed on a merger and was combined into one city. Old Tacoma was now officially known as the First Ward, yet many even to this day call it Old Town. Now the town marshal was replaced with two Tacoma police patrolmen. At this point, Old Tacoma had 400 people, New Tacoma had 4,000. The Old Town Public School, or the First Ward School as it was called, was built in 1885. In 1885, the railway across Washington Territory was finally built over Stampede Pass. This was done by sending trains through a series of switchbacks. Job meets a New York woman, and they write letters back and forth. And in 1884, Job and Addie Emery are married. He was now 71. In 1887, Tacoma is saddened by the death of pioneer founder Job Carr. Also that year, the tunnel through the Stampede Pass was completed. There were no more slow switchbacks. In 1888, the Murphy Building is built. The building is still there today and located at 2102 to 2104 North 30th Street. Famed gambler and theater owner Harry Morgan tried to set a saloon up there. He got caught without a liquor license. The judge wouldn't give him one, but let him hire someone else to hold the license. This same year, they have police watching his businesses day and night to see if there's any gambling going on by order of Judge Allen, the town of Allen's namesake. The Lumber Handlers Union was using it as their hall in 1920. The steamboat Elida had regular service from Old Town Dock to Municipal Dock in Tacoma, as there was no road connecting the two until 1889. That year, Tacoma Avenue was built between the two once separate towns. With it came a streetcar. Now getting downtown was easy. Puget Sound Flouring Mill was built in 1889 by William Ladd, builder of Ladd's Addition in Portland, where I lived for a few years. He got the idea of the street layout for Ladd's Addition from the streets of Paris. The flour mill was sold to Sperry Flour Company in 1922. This flour warehouse was one of three that were on the Old Town waterfront. The First Ward School had its name changed in 1890 to Lowell School in honor of poet James Russell Lowell. In 1890, Tacoma Mill was the largest mill in the world. 2 more sawmills and 2 shingle mills were added to the waterfront that decade, along with a boat builder and a shipyard. Tacoma Grain Company was built in 1890 by the Northern Pacific Elevator Company. It was also known as Elevator A. It was incorporated as Tacoma Grain in 1893. Bishop John Paddock, along with his wife Fanny, made the trip out west from New York in 1891. Fanny raised money for a hospital along the way. Sadly, she died making the trip. A year later, in 1892, the bishop opened the Fanny C. Paddock Memorial Hospital, at present-day 2511 North Star Street. There is a marker on Star Street indicating the location of the first hospital. In 1892, the first shipment of wheat grain left the Puget Sound flouring mill for Asia. A third of the wheat grown in Washington would be exported by what they called the Puget Sound Wheat. Dr. Alice Smith came to Tacoma from Chicago in 1898, where she built a successful practice at present-day 225 North 30th Street, despite the interference by doctors who thought that being a doctor was no profession for a woman. There is a marker on the sidewalk in her honor. The Nelson Bennett Tunnel was built in 1913. Now trains going south would go through Old Tacoma and then on to the tunnel near Ruston and come out just south of Point Defiance. Nelson Bennett also built the Stampede Pass rail tunnel. He died on the eve of the opening of the tunnel he had built that now bears his name. The tunnel was part of the Prairie Line, which at this time extended from Tacoma to Tenino, 43 miles at a cost of $8 million to build. In 1914, the Panama Canal is opened, and now Tacoma can make shipments to Europe. The Sperry Mill remained active under General Mills through the early 1960s. The old mill and elevators were demolished in 1973 when Schuster Parkway was built. The Henry Mill and Timber Company bought 26 acres where the old Tacoma Mill had been in 1922. They opened in 1925. Business really took off when they started making panels for the concrete foundation for the first Narrows Bridge. Most of their business was building trusses for roofs of buildings and other prefabricated building parts for the military as well as aerospace. They operated until 1942 when the mill caught fire due to electrical problems. Quick action by the fire department saved the planer plant, warehouse, and offices, but the sawmill was completely wiped out. No one died and there were no injuries because the sawmill was not operating due to a shortage of logs. They rebuilt, but were bought out by Tacoma Lumber Fabricating Company in 1945. They were not in business at that spot long and got replaced by 1951 by Pacific Company, manufacturers of electric equipment. In 1934, Tacoma Grain sold and was now called Centennial Flouring Mills Company. The building was burned in 1947. This, of course, is not all the history of Old Town, just a few bits of information to help piece together the whole picture. I'm not sure if I will do a part 2 on Old Town or not. Let me know in the comments if you want to know more about this area. Till the next video, enjoy the history that is all around you.